With an upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve, an increase in government expenditure will most likely blink. So in this question, we're told that there is an upward sloping aggregate supply curve, and we're asked to identify what will happen in the situation that there is an increase in government expenditure. And we're given the following results or consequences. So to answer this question, let's begin by drawing the aggregate demand by aggregate supply curve. So for this curve, the x-axis represents the real GDP, which is abbreviated as RGDP. And then the y-axis represents the price level, which we'll abbreviate as PL. And then there are the two curves, the downward sloping aggregate demand curve, which is abbreviated AD, and the upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve, or the SRAS curve. And then there's the third curve, which is the vertical curve, representing the long-run aggregate supply curve. So, option choice A says reduce the price level. This is incorrect because an increase in government expenditure is a factor of the aggregate demand. An increase in this expenditure would mean an increase in the aggregate demand. And an increase in aggregate demand means a shift to the right in the aggregate demand curve, and it would result in this second aggregate demand curve. And if we were to analyze this, the original price level would be right here at this point, but the price level after the increase in government expenditure would be up here. So we can clearly see that the price level would increase, not decrease. Therefore, A can be eliminated. B. Reduce the level of nominal gross domestic product. This is incorrect because if we were to analyze this graph, we can see that the original real gross domestic product is right here, but after the shift to the right in aggregate demand, the new real gross domestic product is right here. Because there's an increase in the gross domestic product, that means that there must be an increase in the nominal gross domestic product as well. So B is also incorrect. C. Increase real gross domestic product. This is the correct answer because we showed earlier how the shift to the right in the AD curve results in an increase in the real gross domestic product. So C is the correct answer. But let's check the other options as well. D. Shift the short-run aggregate supply curve to the right. This is wrong because an increase in government expenditures would not influence the short-run aggregate supply curve. So because of that, we can eliminate option choice D. E. Shift both the aggregate demand curve and the long-run aggregate supply curve to the left. This is incorrect because the aggregate demand curve would shift to the right, not to the left, because an increase in government expenditures would result in an increase in aggregate demand, and an increase in aggregate demand would be represented by a shift to the right in the aggregate demand curve, not a shift to the left. And the long-run aggregate supply curve would not be influenced by a change in government expenditure because the long-run aggregate supply curve is influenced only by the four factors of production: the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So E is incorrect. Therefore, the correct answer is C.